120,000 homes were flooded in the Houston area that were outside of the FEMA flood zones. So they were outside the 100-year floodplain. And
Right.
most of those people did not have flood insurance because if they had a mortgage and they were outside of the FEMA 100-year flood zone, they're not required to have NFIP flood insurance by federal law. So
Right.
most of them didn't. They got flooded. They took a huge financial hit.
Welcome back to the Falls Homefront, where Wichita Falls leads in North Texas real estate, business, and life. I'm Tim Lockhart, and today we're talking about a part of buying a home that most people never think about until it's too late. Understanding the hidden risks that don't show up during a typical home inspection. Joining me today is Albert Slapp, the president and co-founder of RiskFootprint, a company that provides detailed natural hazard and property risk assessments across the United States. Albert brings more than 40 years of experience as an environmental attorney and now helps homebuyers, investors, lenders, and businesses make better informed real estate decisions. Albert, welcome to the Falls Homefront.
Thank you, Tim. It's great to be here and glad to be able to chat a little bit with you and with your listeners and your viewers.
That's great. It sounds like you've had a fascinating career. You spent a decade practicing environmental law before launching the RiskFootprint. What inspired you to make that transition?
Well, Tim, I was an environmental lawyer in the early days of environmental law when the EPA and a lot of the environmental laws were just being passed by Congress. And I always, Boy Scouts and like camping and being in the outdoors. So when I was in law school, Villanova Law School, and found environmental law, I immediately took to it and did that and taught law school at University of Cincinnati, College of Law, taught environmental law, and Florida International University down in Miami. And after quite a number of years, I retired from that. But I had been working with some scientists down in South Florida, primarily from University of Miami and Florida Atlantic University. And we got together and had this idea that there was so many advances in supercomputing and online databases that we could put together an online software as a service, as they call it, report on individual properties and buildings in the United States and sell it to people at a fair price. And that would help them make better decisions about buying, selling, investing, lending money, and things like that. So we did that, and we've been automated and available online for a decade. So for 10 years, we've been doing that. But it's environmental. It's not pollution related or underground tanks or things like that. It's what I, tongue in cheek call it Mother Nature butt kicking. What sort of butt kicking can Mother Nature dish out at your home or business? And that's what we're focusing in on, as opposed to other types of due diligence like radon or asbestos or an underground gasoline tank or a propane tank or something like that that may need to come out.
Okay, that's an interesting story. So something that you often talk about is bringing commercial level due diligence to everyday home buyers. Well, what does that mean?
Well, to tell you the truth, Tim, I think that even home buyers should do this pretty much the same amount of due diligence. I mean, a home is smaller than an office building. And so when you look at all the ways that an office building might be affected by Mother Nature's butt kicking, such as the roof or the windows, or, how much flood water could get in the building, or where all the switchgear is located. but it's really kind of the same thing. It's not, it's just a matter of degree and size and how much work it's going to take to understand where all the risks could affect a large building versus a single family home or a townhouse. But
Hmm.
it's pretty much the same. And it, my personal opinion, and I've been doing this for a long time, is that when we learned about what we call caveat emptor due diligence, or let the buyer beware due diligence, in the first year of law school in our property law class, and what is being done in practice today has degraded a lot over the years. I hate to say it, and I'm sure that there's listeners, reviewers of yours, and are very smart people, and maybe they have done their own due diligence about their home or some place that they would like to buy. But my viewpoint and seeing what's going on in America is that there's a lot less due diligence being done than ought to be done. And I'll tell you why. I mean, what's the, your
Hmm.
viewers and listeners say, well, how can you prove that? Let's go back to Hurricane Harvey in 2017.
Hmm.
120,000 homes were flooded in the Houston area that were outside of the FEMA flood zones. So they were outside the 100-year floodplain. And
Right.
most of those people did not have flood insurance, because if they
Hmm.
had a mortgage and they were outside of the FEMA 100-year flood zone, they're not required to have NFIP flood insurance by federal law. So
Right.
most of them didn't. They
Hmm.
got flooded. They took a huge financial hit to what they were going to fix their house up with their own money without any help from insurance.
Hmm.
Could that have been known? Yes. Our reports, again, we go back to 2016, but our reports would have shown that those houses had flood risks, even though they weren't in the FEMA flood risk zone, and that people should have had flood insurance. My own home, where I'm sitting right now, is a townhome on a golf course in Boca Raton, Florida. I'm in
Hmm.
a FEMA X zone, which is the lowest risk zone, yet I have flood insurance, NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program. I have flood insurance because my own report shows that from the golf course behind my house, that in a very heavy rainstorm, the water could come in my kitchen. Hasn't. Been here 7 years. It hasn't. But so what? Because I'm in a FEMA X zone, my insurance premium for flood insurance is $700 a year. It's a
Hmm.
very small amount of money. So even if someone wanted to buy a home from you that was in a FEMA flood zone or in a heavy rainfall flood zone, I'm not telling them not to buy that house. I'm just telling them, here's the model, here's what the data shows, you should have flood insurance. I don't sell flood insurance, I don't make a penny off it. But I tell people, if they want to buy something, how they can make their property, whether it's residential or commercial, how they can make it better and safer and more resilient.
That's great. Thanks for clarifying that. So when somebody buys a home today, typically they have an agent that's working with them, a realtor, a lender who hires an appraiser, and a title company checks the title, and then there's an insurance agent and a home inspector. However, even with all those people involved, what important things tend to fall through the cracks?
Right. So, one of the problems is that people are looking at a particular home and they sign an agreement of sale, and that kicks off the due diligence period, which may be 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, let's just say. And then during that period, they'll have their home inspection and there'll be an appraisal and there'll be a title report and all the things that you just mentioned.
Hmm.
And what's important to understand is that what I'm doing again, call it the risk of Mother Nature kicking your property's butt, is that needs to be done before you sign the agreement of sale. And the reason is you don't want that clock to be ticking. You want to get down to 3 properties in the right neighborhood, in the right school district. And then you ask me, what's the difference between one property and another? And like, let's just say from a flood standpoint, it's elevation. And, in the real estate business, in your business, you
Mm-hmm.
often say to your clients, location, location,
Yes.
that's the most important thing. And that's true. But it's elevation, because
Mm-hmm.
floodwaters can be around in your street, but if your house is the first floor is higher up than the floodwaters, and it's not coming in your front door. It may come in your neighbor's front door. And you say, well, aren't they all the same in the same neighborhood? And the answer is no, they're not. It may
Mm-hmm.
look the same, but actually the elevation differences vary. And you know this because when you walk around any neighborhood, it's not flat as a pancake. It's different. And in different areas of the country, people raise their homes because of concern. And down in the Florida Keys, they put houses up on stilts. A lot of houses are up on stilts. So that's the thing that I want to get across to people, how important it is to get this type of information before you sign the agreement of sale. It's not expensive. I mean, we charge $200. We
Mm-hmm.
charge $200 per property, which
Mm-hmm.
is less than an appraisal, which is less than a home inspection. And, people say, well, 25 pages and it's complicated. Well,
Mm-hmm.
so's a title report. I mean, a title report's a legal document. Unless you're a
Yeah.
lawyer, you probably are going to look at your title report, which shows that you actually own the
Mm-hmm.
land under your house. And you're not going to be able to read that without a lawyer and really understand what it all means. And I'm not saying that's the same with my report, but it's worth it. It's
Mm-hmm.
just worth understanding what can come at your house and what are some of the low hanging fruit, really inexpensive things that you can do. I mean, just take, for example, some flood barriers. You can buy doorway flood barriers off of Amazon for a
Mm-hmm.
few $100s. I mean, it's not like, well, if I do this, Tim, and I find out blah, 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 it's just going to cost me a lot of money. I'd rather not know and take my chances with insurance. And frankly, what I've learned over many years of doing this is that flood insurance isn't a
Mm-hmm.
get out of jail free card.
And so here in North Texas, we deal with everything from hailstorms to tornadoes, droughts, and floodings. So how has the better data changed the way that we should evaluate our property risk?
Right. So there is, in our report and also available elsewhere, is a lot of information about the risk of all sorts of hazards, including hailstorms, including landslides, wildfires, and all that, which is in our report, I think we have 34 different hazards. And what I want to make clear to your listeners and your viewers is I don't think there's any wrong house, wrong purchase, wrong building. It has to do with the level of risk that is shown by the models and the personal and what we call the risk tolerance or risk appetite
Mm-hmm.
of the buyer. I mean, there's an island a little north of Miami in the intercoastal waterway down here in Florida called Indian Creek Island. And it's 41 homes on the island, on the perimeter of the island, and the interior is a golf course. Every one of the 41 homes is owned by a billionaire. And they write articles in the Miami Herald about the Miami billionaire's bunker. The highest point on Indian Creek Island is probably 3.5, 4 feet above sea level. It's
Mm-hmm.
one of the riskiest places in America. Now, who
Mm-hmm.
owns there? Jeff Bezos, Amazon, Mark Zuckerberg, Meta. And you say to yourself, whoa, would they put a data center or an Amazon warehouse 3.5 feet above sea level in a hurricane zone? No, they would not. Would Mark Zuckerberg put a Meta data center three? No, they would not. But they don't care. If you have 150 plus $1 billion
Yeah.
and you are buying property for $150 million, doesn't matter to you. Now, I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone here,
Mm-hmm.
but what I'm trying to say is that each one of your clients is different. I would think most of the people who are buying property in Wichita Falls are average, maybe middle class people.
Mm-hmm.
And so a home is going to be one of the largest financial investments of their life.
That's right.
And they may stay there 5, 7 years when they get transferred or something, or they may stay there for their entire life and try to
Mm-hmm.
pass it along to their children or grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all great. So their tolerance or appetite for risk is going to be different than a billionaire.
Right.
Just it's just the way it is. And so just that people, when they're making these decisions, whether they care a lot or care a little about what they're doing, they should
Mm-hmm.
still get all the facts. And the facts are very easy and fast now with so much data being online and available with supercomputing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, for homeowners who already own their home, is it too late for them to benefit from this type of information?
Good question. Very good question, Tim. So a lot of owners go like, I'm never going to buy that report because I'm going to then know, I may know information that I would have to disclose to a buyer, and that would, depress the price of my home. But I sell the risk footprint reports to buyers and to owners. And on the ownership side, again, I want to go back to the low hanging fruit. There are things that can be done that can make a house or a property safer and more resilient in these various storms and other things. Some things may not be able to be done, but some things can. I mean, let's just take, I don't know, one example. Suppose you have a home that doesn't have a garage, but you could, create a carport to protect it from hail. Okay. So maybe you can't build a full enclosed garage for whatever reason, price, or, the layout of your property, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe you could build a carport and that would protect your car from the next hailstorm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean by thinking through what can be done as opposed to saying, I don't want to know. And because the thing is that people are living down there and know about hailstorms and
Mm-hmm.
they know about tornadoes.
Right.
My son and grandson live in Indianapolis
Mm-hmm.
and area, and they have an area in the basement below the stairs that they've set up for as their little tornado safe area. And that's not expensive,
Mm-hmm.
but they know what to do when the tornado sirens go off.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that people have to think about.
Right. Yeah. So, well, what are the first steps that a homeowner should do to better understand their property's risks?
I mean, I didn't, really come here to do a hard sell on the risk footprint.
Mm-hmm.
But my recommendation is you don't just look at scores. Scores are too, you know, wishy-washy and
Hmm.
subjective. If people, want to go to riskfootprint.com, they can get a report on their home the same day,
Hmm.
and a couple $100 is pretty reasonable for this
Hmm.
kind of information. And I will say this now, we sell the report for 200, and then we online, if you want to communicate with us and have us talk you through the report, we typically would charge a little bit more for that. But I would say, for if anybody buys a report or wants a report and mentions Tim Lockhart, we one of our risk advisors will be glad
Hmm.
to talk with them once they buy the report for no additional charge. And I say that because I'm doing this. I mean, I was an environmental lawyer and I taught law
Right.
school, and I'm doing this my second career because I really believe in it. And I believe that we do help people make better decisions to make their homes safer and more resilient for them and whoever is, going to buy the home, or if they're going to, leave the home to their, some relatives. There's things that they can do that will really, be to their advantage.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. So, what home improvements tend to provide the biggest return for homeowners?
That depends on where you live. If you live in certain areas of California where there's been the wildfires, vegetation management is going to be the most important. Getting the burnable vegetation near your home cut down and cut back. Where I am down in Florida, and actually live closer to the Everglades than I do to the coast, but I'm in the hurricane wind zone. And I'll tell you something that I did with my home that most of my neighbors don't do. I mean, I can't be out there with signs, telling them and, hitting them over the head with information. But so insurance down here is primarily driven by the hurricane wind risks.
Hmm.
My home, I'm currently paying this year, 2026, 2027, $6,000 a year for my homeowner's insurance. Now, this
Hmm.
is maybe interesting to your viewers and listeners. The breakdown, and I think I'm using State Farm, the breakdown is $5,000 for the hurricane wind and $1,000 premium for everything
Yes.
else. That means that my house
Right.
could burn to the ground. And the insurance company thinks that risk is only $1,000 of premium risk per year, and
Yeah.
5,000 is hurricane wind.
Yes.
So what a lot of the brokers who don't really understand what they're doing tell their clients, you must get a new roof. Okay,
Hmm.
so elderly people, whatever, you must get a new roof. So
Hmm.
they go out to a roofing company and they spend 40 or $50,000. There's, the decorative tiles down here. All the houses have the ceramic tiles,
Hmm.
and they take the old tiles off. There's a membrane, and they take that off and they put a new membrane on over the wood or a plywood, and then they
Hmm.
put new tiles on. Now, maybe they have reduced the risk of a leak a little bit, but they've done nothing to keep the roof tied down to the walls. What
Right.
is really the $5,000 risk is not a small leak in the membrane. It's your roof
Hmm.
flies off in a Cat 3, 4, or 5 hurricane. So
Right.
what I did is I had a team go up in the my townhouse is 1989, and it
Hmm.
was built to 1989 code,
Hmm.
but the codes changed in Florida in 1992 with Hurricane Andrew, which
Yes.
came in and blew tens of thousands of roofs off. So the Florida building code and the county building codes all changed in 1992 with
Mm-hmm.
double straps and bigger nails and clips and all sorts of things that hold the roof down to the walls. Okay. So I had a team come in for $5,000, not $30,000 or $40,000. They went up into my attic and
Mm-hmm.
they tried to make it as close to the current code as possible. And then they armored my garage door because what happens is the hurricane wind blows your garage door in,
Mm-hmm.
then pops all your windows out because it's putting pressure from the inside, which is
Mm-hmm.
different than tornadoes. And, I don't know what you do with a tornado other than get into the basement and get into your safe spot. But down here, what I've done, I believe, has reduced my insurance premium. And it also helps me sleep at night because I know that my roof is less likely to blow off than
Mm-hmm.
some of my neighbors' roofs who look maybe a little fresher than mine in terms of the tiles are
Mm-hmm.
newer, look a little better, but they're not as safe because the roofing companies never say to the homeowner, hey, let me get up in your attic and tie things down. Why? I've talked to some of them when they've been in the neighborhood and
Mm-hmm.
they go like, nah, we don't do that. So fine. But
Mm-hmm.
there are ways, as I said, there's, you know, th- putting a carport to protect your car from hail,
Mm-hmm.
vegetation management in California for wildfires, tying the roof down to the walls in South Florida. And,
Mm-hmm.
I could go on and on about different things that are not hair on fire, but are low hanging fruit with reasonable costs that will make your property safer.
Thank you for that. So I've got another question for you. Let's say my daughter was getting ready to buy her very first home. Knowing everything that you've learned over the last several decades, what is one question you would insist that she answer before signing the closing papers?
I would say that she should get a risk footprint or similar report and go over it with her partner or spouse or whoever. And if they have questions, try to get those questions answered about that house and compare that. Again, I'm go back to my point of, let's just say, narrowing it down to 3 homes in a particular neighborhood or an area.
Mm-hmm.
And each one is going to have, forgetting about the risks and the hazards, each one is going to have advantages and disadvantages. And I did the same thing with my son in Indianapolis. And I said to him, don't fall in love with a house. A house is a house, and we make it, my wife and I make it a home. We,
Mm-hmm.
that it, over the years, I've lived in many different homes, and including some historical homes that date back to the 1800s. And it's not the physical structure is nice, but it's you want a safe and secure place to build a home, which does not happen outside of the people, the humans that are living in it. So I would say that's a little bit of wisdom, which is pick of the 3 top of your list, the
Mm-hmm.
one that is safest. And if you don't do that, if you really want to fall in love with the house, just
Mm-hmm.
make sure that you have enough money in the bank because the insurance is not going to cover everything. So
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have risks that will need to be self insured, paid for from your own pocketbook,
Mm-hmm.
or, then maybe the house is unsalvageable and you
Mm-hmm.
end up moving to some other place anyway.
No, that's very helpful. So, what is the most surprising thing that you've learned over the years?
I, you know, and I've mentioned this in our interview, it surprises me how the younger generation has let caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, due diligence decline and decline, so that they, I don't even think they were, when Zillow and Realtor.com had those scores on their website and then they took them off recently, which you're probably aware of. I don't think most people even looked at those scores, or
Hmm.
if they looked at them, they didn't really pay enough attention. And that's surprising to me because, the younger generation has access. And now with AI, you have
Hmm.
access to an unbelievable amount of information about each neighborhood, each community, down to possibly even the street level. You
Hmm.
have it. So, why do they not take advantage of this in making decisions of such magnitude regarding buying a home, which average prices are, 500,000,
Hmm.
some places a million? I mean, I bought my first home in the Philadelphia suburbs. I bought my first home for $150,000.
Hmm.
And it was a very nice home. I'm sure today it would be, well over $1 million. But it's like it's just declined. And I
Hmm.
can't explain it. I don't understand why,
Hmm.
yet I see it every day. So
Really?
that would be probably the most surprising thing to me.
Hmm.
And, maybe you can chime in, Tim, because
Yeah.
you work with home buyers and home
Hmm.
sellers every day. So maybe you can
Yeah.
educate me. I've educated you on a few things. Maybe you can educate me.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yes, some home buyers, are very cautious and ask a lot of questions, and some aren't. I think it goes with that risk tolerance that you were talking about. Different people have, just different levels of risk tolerance. And also, that's kind of part of the reason why I do this is because if people don't know the right questions to ask, they're not going to get the right answers. And if somebody doesn't know to ask the questions,
Right,
then they might
right.
not ever know that there's a risk there that they weren't aware of.
Well, you're selling to a lot of people in the military, and you live
Yes.
near an Air Force base, and you were in the Air Force.
Hmm.
And so, a military term that has come over to my world is threat multiplier. And you hear
Yes.
that in the military, at least I think it was a military term.
Hmm.
But now they talk about these hazards as threat multipliers and climate change as a threat multiplier. And I think if people in your world who maybe in the military or have come out of the military, and they're thinking about in one part of their mind what they've learned in defending America. Think about defending your home with the same mindset as you
Hmm.
were taught to defend America. Don't think about your home as some little risk free island. It's not. People say, I'm not in a FEMA floods. And I say, does it rain where you live? Oh, yeah, it rains. Then it can flood where you live. If
Yeah.
it rains where you live, it can flood where you live. So
Hmm.
if there are some simple things that you could do, I talk about some doorway barriers. I talk
Hmm.
about regrading or landscaping your property so water flows easily away from the foundation to your home, not toward the
Hmm.
foundation of your home.
Hmm.
And the gutters, where does the water flow when it comes off your roof? There's so many things that can be done in small baby steps, that it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to lift my home and raise it, 5 feet or something. I mean, yeah, people do that. People actually do raise their homes, and sometimes it's worth it. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, try to figure out what are some of the low hanging fruit. With regard to flooding, and there's people down here in Florida that know that their air conditioning outside has to be up on a platform. It can't be on a little concrete pad on the ground because it'll be underwater in one of these events. So they put their HVAC, the compressors, up on platforms. So, I mean, that's not expensive. That's not an expensive thing to do, but it could really make a big difference. Or whether you have a generator or not, a backup generator and things like that.
Great, Albert. This has been a very eye-opening conversation. Buying a home is one of the biggest financial decisions that most families will ever make. And today's discussion is a reminder that informed buyers make better long-term decisions. For anyone who's listening who wants to learn more about the risk footprint or to connect with you directly, what's the best way to do that?
Well, go to our website, which is www.riskfootprint.com, and there you can find all of our contact information, emails, phone numbers.com. And like I said, if anybody who's listening wants to buy a report for the $200 online and they communicate with us, once they get their report, they'll be able to call us for a free consultation. Just mention Tim Lockhart.
Great. Thank you for making that available. That's great. So to the listeners out there, if you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend or a family member, fellow realtor or investor, or anyone that's planning to buy a home. Thanks for turning into the Falls Home Front, where we bring you the people and ideas and expertise helping North Texans make smarter real estate decisions. Appreciate you tuning in. Want more insider tips on buying, selling, and investing in Wichita Falls and North Texas? Subscribe now and keep watching. Your next move starts here.